maybe say a little more. Was there a key moment of breakthrough where all of a sudden you decided on the place this to do it? Was it more a case of practice?
The influence of friends and people he got to know and he respected had an influence on that transition. There's something of a parallel with Newman and Elizabeth Seton. Elizabeth Seton grew up in an environment in New York which was almost totally bereft of any Catholic reference. But when she went to Italy, her husband was sick, or he died. She was taken in by an Italian family and taken to their church, and it was that personal contact which began to open her eyes. Of course, with Newman, he was obliged to be a defender of the established church, and he knew all the arguments, which is why I think he became more dramatic and more pronounced in his criticisms of Catholicism than he would be just as an uninterested observer. But going to Rome, going through Italy, going through any Latin culture was it was culturally shocking, but it was a kind of shock that brings you back later on when the initial shock wears off to your senses. And he had that mystical experience when he was sick on that boat, when he wrote The Pillar of the Cloud, Kindly Light, and I think he kept reflecting on that. And he realized that the veneer that he had created to justify his Anglicanism was cracking. I am the first chaplain of the St. Andrew Society of New York in 254 years, the first Catholic chaplain. Always have a minister of the Kirk. They still do. We get on very well. In fact, he was the one who invited me to lower the tone of things. And for the first time, we had the Kirking of the Tartan in my church. For a lot of these people, to this day, I think it was the first time they'd ever been in a Catholic church. And it was like, trying to put themselves in their shoes. It was like going into a Hindu temple. Some Catholics today still say it. But we had a nice breakfast afterwards, and they had their breakfast beverage of choice, which was Scotch whiskey, and we became very ecumenical. But it was a lot of, you see, Newman's there, it's very hard for us to believe. Newman had never met, most of us people had really never met a Catholic. When Father Barbieri, the Passionist, went to England, he wore a cassock, and the children threw stones at him. They obviously were prompted, but it just was an odd thing. So Newman was reacting against something which he really knew nothing except what he had read.
I was wondering if you could say anything about the proposed forms of these Anglican ordinariates, because Don Gregory Hicks, for example, the Anglican Benedictine book, the prayer book, was utterly swingly and it was inadequate. He used to use some form of the Sarum himself. So, Newman says that if you have Orthodox faith, you can listen to heterodox without realizing it and overcome it. So, can the prayer book be used in Catholic worship?
The prayer book, as it says, of course, could not. But the pastoral provision has already adapted parts of the prayer book. But as you said, the Eucharistic prayer had to be revised, and it has been revised. And I think that's the Spade book already done. And so in this ordinariate, I'm pretty sure that's what they will be using. But there is that question I raised about what is this matrimony? Is it aesthetics? Is it, well, a lot of that tradition of the Catholic Latin Church, which had lost and then revived in the established Church of England. But it is significant too that in the pastoral provision there's no talk of a rite. It's an Anglican use because the prayer book is not an ancient rite. It's an adaptation of a rite which existed.
We spoke of a mystical experience that Newman had on one ship. Do you know anything more about that?
Well, I guess a doctor could say he was just in a delirium. He had a very bad fever, but being the writer he was, he got a lot of writing out of it. And that great poem was a product of it. But it gave him a long time. He was becalmed along Sicily. It was 4 days. And I think that gave him a long time to think. Newman was not given to mystical experiences or gifts as such. Although as Father Carter did point out, he certainly was prophetic in so many ways. But part of that was just the acuity of his logic. Richard Wakely said he had never seen such a clear mind. There is some I've tried to find the source of it. I haven't been successful. In some place where Newman says that there will be a day when there would be a Polish pope, or a Slavic pope. I've seen that quoted several times, because other sources have said the same thing. But this was attributed to Newman, but there's no question that he was prophetic, which is different from being just a mystic, visionary.
Father, it seems to me that the two subjects that Newman have undergone a lot of mystery in our time, ultimately the conscience, the understanding of conscience, which has been used to justify the sense. For instance, in the case of human feedback. And then developed the sense that before this had the church was developed, evolved, I suppose. It seems to be his understanding of development was far different from his vision and his view of conscience as well in this story. What do you about?
Well, they've been very much distorted, and the only explanation, there are only two explanations. One is ignorance, or the other is dishonesty. No one can read what he said on those subjects without being absolutely clear in one's own mind that he had a perfectly orthodox understanding. The way he said this, of course, was a shock even to the Catholics of his time, because he was reminding them of their own authentic tradition. The importance of conscience was perfectly patristic, perfectly Thomistic doctrine. And when he talks about the development of doctrine, he's talking about a chronic vigor which gives life to the unchanging truths. This is the reality of tradition, which is very much understood. The church is not a museum piece. There's nothing new in that. But I think it was the fact that in his time he was stating it that was startling. But nothing worse than somebody who comes with this. There are Monday morning quarterbacks in football, and there are the equivalent in theology. People who really don't know what they're talking about, but they think they could have done much better. And there are a lot of people who refashion Newman into their own image. We're going to have an awful